Hello, everyone. I'm Alexis Yoder, and I'm joined alongside Max Ralph from the Daily Collegian's football staff. Max, I'm going to talk a lot about our new hire that we saw. Penn State got special teams coordinator Stacy Collins fresh into this Penn State program, replacing Joe Lorg. What do you think of this hire?
Yeah, I'm a big fan off of immediate reaction. We haven't seen his product on the field yet, but it's funny. Him and Lorig have kind of crossed paths in a lot of places. They played college ball together, have coached in a couple of spots. So it's funny that Franklin goes from Lorig, who's been on staff for so long, to someone who knows Lorig well. But
And just to throw in there too, in his first presser today, Stacy Collins actually talked about Joe Moorhead too and how they've crossed paths as well. So a lot of history between him and some former Penn Staters.
Yeah, it's an interesting hire because it's a little bit different from other things that James Franklin has done. You know, he's got the West Coast influence, which we'll talk about. But Collins is coming off of a season in Boise State where his special teams units put up really impressive numbers. They were up near the top in punt return yards, I think fourth in the nation, or fifth in the nation, and also they blocked 3 punts and 4 kicks this year. He talked a lot in his opening press conference today about, kind of that aggressiveness on special teams and how that's what he likes to do. But it also kind of comes with the personnel that he has, and he talked about that. And I think he's got a really good special teams mind, and he'll be creative and aggressive, and that's something that Penn State needs because they haven't gotten a lot of blocked kicks. The punt return and kick return games were relatively weak this year. I mean, we didn't see a lot of explosive plays out on special teams this year. So I think Collins should be an interesting hire to at least see if they can develop into that. But like I mentioned, that West Coast influence is interesting and has already kind of shown up a little bit here.
Yeah, so Penn State got two signees today, one of which announced his commitment really today, Vega Ione from the West Coast, as you mentioned, then also Lackawanna College JUCO product Tyrese Mills. So, as you said, that Western connection is already starting to show up really early on in this in recruiting for this year, which I think is going to be really important just because Penn State has a lot of ties in the South. We've seen it in Michigan and the Midwest over and over again, and they really haven't been able to consistently attract top recruits from the West Coast. So, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of turns here now that they have Stacy Collins in there. He could start building those connections for Penn State on the West Coast. So that's definitely going to be something we have to watch. But getting back to these recruits, I want to focus on Mills here first. He drew a lot of comparisons to his counterparts that were also Lackawanna College products in Jair Brown and Jaquan Brisker. And Franklin really talked about how he can really play anywhere, any safety position, and that's some versatility that Penn State's really going to enjoy having, and he also has 3 years of eligibility left, so a lot of time to develop. Whether he chooses to use all of it or not, we're not sure, but that'll be something that's interesting to watch, especially since, they lost Jaquan Brisker to the NFL this year. They have Jair Brown returning. Could we see another pairing of Lackawanna products next to each other?
Who knows?
Possible, but
we might.
It's very interesting. So I'm looking forward to see how he develops, just because of how well Brisker and Brown have developed over this year. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say those two have worked out pretty well for Penn State. Jaquan is probably on his way to being a day 1 or day 2 draft pick, and Jair's come back for another year after he tied for the lead in interceptions in the NCAA. So those two have been pretty good, and I think Mills is coming in with kind of the potential to be a day 1 impact guy. I don't know if he'll be a starter, but Jaquan Brisker is a huge hit to that safety room. So I think Tyrese coming in is going to be really interesting to see, and I think, assuming he develops the way they want him to, he could be a day 1 contributor. But moving over to Vega Ione, it's a really interesting recruiting job and kind of a really impressive one by Penn State and Stacy Collins, because they only reached out to him and offered him about a month ago. He used to be committed to Washington. He's from Washington State. And then all of a sudden he decommits and Penn State gets in on him. And within about a month's time, the favorite from Washington kind of flipped over to Penn State. And he's been someone the staff talked really highly of today. As soon as he announced his commitment, Franklin, in the middle of his press conference, was like, hey, just wanted to let you guys know we've signed Vega. And
How excited he is about
I know.
this.
It was interesting. Him and Stacy Collins both were really talking a lot about how, Franklin said something about him carrying his weight as good as anybody he's ever seen. He's a big guy. He's a nice 3-star offensive lineman. And Collins mentioned how he's literally the class president in his high school, which is that speaks something about his off-field character. So I think it's a really impressive recruiting job just because they're dipping into an area that they don't have a lot of experience in, and a lot of that is coming from Stacy Collins, who joined the staff just about a month ago. And it's really interesting to see how that presence in a new area has already taken over.
Excited to see how that develops, whether it's short-term, long-term. We'll have to see what the effects are on it for Penn State's recruiting trail down the road. Stay tuned for more video coverage from the Daily Collegian at collegian.psu.edu.